Hi everybody. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the remote logging feature of MobileFirst and show how we can use that within an Ionic hybrid application. Now, if you're not aware of what the remote logging feature is, it basically is that. It's the ability for your mobile applications to log remotely to your MobileFirst server. Now the API is really well done. It's going to batch things up and only send it when it needs to. You have really fine-grained control over the types of logs and what messages. And as opposed to your typical console.log message that you do during development, this allows you to actually have things out in production, collect logs, and then examine them later. If you have your MobileFirst console open like I do here, you can click right up here and open up the Operations Analytics, and I've already done that right here. You have a Search tab, and from there you can actually search against all your log messages, and you have a variety of different filters. So what's cool about this is that if you have people complaining about iOS, for example, you can come in here and say, I only care about the iPhone environment, and look at the messages just from there. And it's a real simple web-based interface. You can drill in, you can do filters based on dates as well. So it's a very, very handy feature. Let's look at the code to add this to an Ionic application. So I started with the tabs default application. This is one of the starter templates you get when you create a new Ionic application. I went into my services file and I created an instance of the logging service. And it's pretty trivial. You see I'm doing wl.logger.create. Now there's a whole variety of different options you could send. I'm doing auto send logs because I want the service to send the logs automatically. Now, one thing I want to point out, even with this turned on, the service is not going to send logs immediately. It's going to wait until it has a certain amount of them before it does that network request. You can also kill the application and restart it, and on startup it will recognize that it has log messages queued and it'll go ahead and send those. Now the logging service allows for different levels of logging, so info, debug, error, etc. I built a service that pretty much just does the default log message. So you can see that my service has a argument for the string, and I basically just do logger.log and send the message. So pretty darn simple. In terms of how I use it, I went into my controllers, and again, this is from the default tabs template. And basically, whenever a controller is instantiated, the first time it's viewed basically, I go ahead and I call my service. And you can see I'm injecting it into all of my controllers. So I have one sent for the dash control, the chats. For chat detail, I'm actually passing along the particular ID. And in one of the tabs, and I'll show this in a second, we actually have a toggle that we can switch to true and false. And I'm listening to those changes and logging that as well. So if we view this in the console, in the mobile browser simulator, let me make some more room there and just refresh, you could see that the logging service will actually send to the console.log as well. So that's kind of handy when I'm in here. And as I click around, you could see the messages being sent in, and I'll go into account and I'll toggle friends to true and false. Okay, so that's the mobile browser simulator version of this. Let's look at the iPhone emulator. Have my Xcode project. I will just move this over here and readjust this over here, and we will hit play, and there we go. So let me actually bring this back a little bit. So one thing I want to point out is when you're running via Xcode, you can see the messages, and here, let me just adjust this a little bit higher. Thank you, Xcode. All right, and you could see me toggling the friends back and true. When you run the application like this, If you were to use Safari Remote Debug, you actually don't see the console.log message here. So if I go back to Chrome, it's only going to show up in your browser console when you're using the mobile browser simulator. When you're running it via the iOS emulator, it will show up in Xcode, but not Safari. Now, if that bugged me, I can actually just go into my service and add my own console.log. Wouldn't be that big of a deal. But you could see the messages going back and forth, and I'll just click a few more times. Now, like I said, the messages will be queued up until a certain amount of messages are there, and then they'll be sent over the wire. I can go ahead and kill this. Let me really kill it. And then just let me run my application. All right, so it's loaded up. Now if I go back to my analytics and search again, I should see a bunch of the testing that I just did. And you could see it back and forth. And again, if I wanted to do some filtering, like enable friends and search, I could see just those particular messages as well. And again, I could click in there for details and see all kind of cool stuff like OS version, etc. I mean, again, what's cool is that you have all of this logging, but you have really great tools to kind of filter based on a particular device, platform, or even type of message, which makes working with the logs a heck of a lot easier.